Yet it was our infirmities that he bore, our sufferings that he endured, while we thought of him as stricken, as one smitten by God and afflicted. But he was pierced for our offenses, crushed for our sins. Upon him was the chastisement that makes us whole. By his stripes we were healed. We had all gone astray like sheep, each following his own way. But the Lord laid upon him the guilt of us all.
Father, into your hands I commend my spirit.
Brothers and sisters, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses.
Didn't I see you in the garden with him? Again, Peter denied it, and immediately the cock crowed. When the chief priests and the guards saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him." There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side. When Jesus had taken the wine, he said, "It is finished," and bowed down his head. He handed over the Spirit.
The Triduum, we just have this one liturgy that flows through these 3 days. It's one continuous celebration. You notice at the beginning of today's celebration that there's not music, there's not really the formal procession. We just kind of walk in and the prostration happens, right? It's that laying down of ourselves before the altar, which serves for us as the initial symbol, a focus for us as a type of cross. The wood of the altar is the wood of the cross. And part of what's unifying these 3 days is the fact that that's what Jesus was doing. The Thursday night, as he celebrated the Last Supper and showed them this is how he wants us to celebrate the covenant in his blood, that he's beginning a liturgy that continues on into the next day when he offers himself upon the wood of the cross. That he gives his body and his blood to his apostles, and the next day he puts his body and his blood up upon a cross, and that he's dragged all over Jerusalem, dripping blood through the city. The separation of his body and blood is a symbol of his death. It's a symbol of his self-emptying, his pouring out of his entire self in love for us. And so today, as we continue, we don't offer the sacrifice of the Mass in the same way because we did that last night. Right? And the communion that's received today is that which was consecrated at last night's Last Supper Mass. At every Mass that we celebrate, we are admonished at the beginning of the Eucharistic liturgy, lift up your hearts. This is the only day when we don't say those words as part of the liturgy, even though I'm saying them now in the homily. What I mean is, we're not going to hear those words in the usual way that we would celebrate the Mass, but I think maybe today more than ever, those words are so vital for us to hear. That we need to be reminded. That's the reason why we're reminded every single time that we gather, every other day of the year. It's because that's where the Eucharist is leading us. Right? That one of the most marvelous elements of that Eucharistic covenant that the Lord forged at the Last Supper and brought to completion upon the cross is that he leads us from ritual into relationship. He leads us from something communal into something deeply personal. And so we're told to lift up our hearts because that's where he wants us to receive when we come to communion. That's what he wants ultimately is our hearts. And then he goes out and shows us what that looks like. That as the Son of Man is lifted up and we look upon the one who is pierced, he has lifted up his heart to the Father. He's shown us what the way of the cross looks like, not so that we could just sit back and be sad and grateful, but also that we might draw from him and be nourished by his body and blood, that we might also follow in his path. Lift up your hearts. Lift them up to the Lord. Right? He'll draw us back to himself. Behold the wood of the cross, on which hung the salvation of the world.
Let us adore.
Behold the wood of the cross, on which hung the salvation of the world.
Come, let us adore. How deep the Father's love for us, how vast the unknown measure, that He should give His only Son to